Special sangria? Just for you, Margot Ellison said with a smile as sweet as the drink she was holding. Her manicured fingers trembled just slightly as she handed me the glass, one of two she'd kept separate from the others in the kitchen of her meticulously curated Oak Bay home. Only for my favorite son-in-law, she added, and I nodded politely, thanking her as I took both glasses from the counter. But what she didn't know, or maybe had underestimated, was that I'd seen her. I'd stepped in just early enough to watch her tilt a small vial into the rim of one of the glasses, her eyes darting to the hallway as if checking if the coast was clear. My pulse had kicked up then, not from surprise, but recognition. Something wasn't right. Something hadn't been right for years. So I did the only thing I could without creating a scene. I switched the glasses. Margot's home was as polished as her image, coastal-themed accents framed family portraits with everyone but me, and candles that smelled like money. The kind of place you'd find on the cover of a West Coast lifestyle magazine. But beneath the warm lighting and gleaming floors, the tension pulsed quietly, tightly wound like a violin string no one dared pluck. Emily, my wife, stood in the dining room chatting with her brother Noah and his wife Ava. I walked over and placed the altered glass, the one Margot had meant for me, right in front of Richard, her husband. He barely looked up from his phone. "Sangria, sir," I said evenly before turning and placing the second glass quietly on the sideboard for myself. Except I wouldn't be drinking it. Dinner had gone the usual way. Richard spent most of the meal talking about interest rates and oil stocks. Margot floated between seats, topping up plates no one asked to refill, asking Emily whether she'd thought about cutting back her work hours once children come into the picture. Noah made polite conversation. Ava looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. I smiled, nodded, bit my tongue. This wasn't new. I'd learned long ago how to wear my patience like a second skin, but when Margot cornered me in the kitchen earlier, I felt the air change. "You've been so busy lately, Liam. We barely see you," she said, her voice edged with sugar and subtle guilt. I offered to help carry drinks, and that's when I caught the sleight of hand, the vial. The quick pour, the false smile. 45 minutes after Richard drank the glass, it began. First came the sweat, glistening on his forehead, the way he dabbed his napkin and loosened his collar. Then the twitching lips, the pale skin, and the sudden bolt from the table. Sounds from the upstairs bathroom echoed like thunder, retching, gagging water running endlessly. Margot rushed up the stairs after him, but not before our eyes met, hers wide with dawning realization, mine calm and unreadable. In that brief silence, everything was exposed. She knew that I knew, and I knew that she had tried to drug me. Emily looked panicked, rising from her seat. "He must have had bad shrimp," she said half to herself. "Or maybe it's the wine, possibly," I murmured. "Though you'd think Margot would know what's in her own sangria." I reached forward and grabbed the untouched glass she'd handed me, slipped it into my coat pocket when no one was looking. Ava met my eyes across the table and tilted her head ever so slightly, as if to say, I saw something too. The rest of the evening was a haze of awkward cleanup and whispered apologies. Richard refused to come back downstairs. Margot emerged with a forced smile and a tight excuse about maybe the clams. But I wasn't listening to the cover stories anymore. I was already thinking of Jason. Jason Ung, a former client of mine, ran a toxicology lab just outside Victoria, near Esquimalt. I'd taken his engagement photos 2 summers ago. We'd kept in touch. The next morning I called him and told him I had a sample I needed tested quietly. He didn't ask many questions. "Personal or professional?" he said. "Family," I replied. "Say no more," he told me. I delivered the glass in a sealed Ziploc bag wrapped in a towel. 3 days later, Jason called. "Liam, he said you've got benzos in that drink. Not lethal, but enough to knock someone out for hours. Maybe memory fog. Someone wanted you out cold." There was a pause. "Where did you get it?" "Can't say," I replied, "but I need a written report." That night I sat in my studio, the test results on my desk, and the glass now washed and placed on a high-shelf evidence, not decoration. I didn't feel rage. I felt something colder, more precise. This wasn't going to be settled with shouting or accusations. It wouldn't be some dramatic confrontation in the middle of a family meal. I was going to do what I'd always done best: observe, document, frame the story in a way that no one could ignore. Because if Margot thought I was just a photographer, she was about to learn how dangerous that could be. Looking back, the signs weren't subtle. They were obvious. They were deliberate. But I had chosen, for Emily's sake and maybe for my own peace, to ignore them. Now that I had proof Margot had tried to drug me, all the little comments, the microaggressions, the sideways glances, they all resurfaced with unbearable clarity. It wasn't one moment that defined their disdain for me. It was 1,000 small ones they thought I wouldn't notice. But I had. And now I couldn't unsee any of it. Every Sunday dinner at the Ellison house had been a slow erosion of my dignity, masked in linen napkins and artisanal side dishes. Richard, always in his pressed button-downs and polished Oxfords, would ask how the little photography venture was going, as though my work with Canadian Geographic or the Globe and Mail were hobbyist dabblings. "You make enough to pay the bills with that, Liam?" he asked once while carving lamb roast. "Or is Emily still the breadwinner?" That was year 2. I laughed politely. Emily kicked me gently under the table. Margot's tactics were different, more refined. She'd introduce me at neighborhood mixers as Emily's husband, the artist, with a tone that sounded vaguely apologetic. Once, when I was showcasing a photo series of endangered species from Alberta at a gallery downtown, she told Emily, "It's so nice he has a creative outlet." Creative outlet. That one stung more than it should have. And yet, through all of it, I endured. I smiled. I brought expensive bottles of Okanagan wine. I offered to help around their house. I shared stories about my clients, my exhibitions, my bookings. I thought if I just kept showing up with grace, they'd eventually see me. Not just as Emily's husband, but as someone worthy of respect. I was wrong. Then there were the omissions family photos where I was accidentally cut off. Holiday cards signed only by the Ellisons, despite Emily and I living just 10 minutes away. Even the family group chat excluded me until Emily noticed and added me herself. When she did, Margot messaged privately, "Don't take it personally, dear. Richard doesn't like too many people in group messages." But the moment that plays on loop in my head now happened during a Thanksgiving dinner 2 years ago. Emily and I had just started talking about having kids. We were excited, nervous, of course, but hopeful. At one point in the evening, Richard pulled me aside in his study. The fire was crackling, the room smelled like cedar and aged scotch. "Liam," he said, "children are expensive. Maybe think about getting a real job before you bring one into the world." I froze. "A real job," he repeated, sipping his drink. I nodded because I didn't trust myself to speak. I never told Emily about that conversation. She loved her father. And part of me, maybe the most fragile part, wanted to believe that Richard was just a dinosaur stuck in a different era and not malicious. I was wrong there too. Then there was what I overheard one evening after a Christmas brunch. We were all packing up leftovers and I'd gone back inside to grab Emily's scarf. I paused in the hallway when I heard Margot on the phone in the den. Yes, Thomas would have been a perfect match. Orthopedic, comes from a good family. But no, Emily had to fall for the photographer. She said it like it was a disease. I backed away slowly, scarf in hand, face hot. Thomas. I'd never heard his name before. Emily had never spoken about any serious partner before me. But clearly, Margot still carried a torch for the life Emily didn't choose. After the attempted drugging, all of these moments came crashing back like a dam finally breaking. And it wasn't just their words. It was the way Margot would ask Emily to help in the kitchen every time I mentioned a new project, a new feature, a new publication. It was the way she praised Noah's every promotion like it was proof of genetic superiority, while my achievements were politely smiled at and quietly discarded. But what hurt the most was realizing that I had internalized their dismissal. I'd started to doubt myself. I'd started to wonder if maybe they were right, if my work wasn't serious enough, if my life path was just a phase. That kind of doubt seeps in when you spend too long being told in quiet ways that you're not enough. I sat in my studio that week staring at the photos from the Montana Chute bison cresting over snow-covered hills, a fox peering through frozen brush, the pale morning light breaking over a ridge. I had risked frostbite for these. Camped alone, tracked patterns through the forest, captured images that would fund our mortgage for 3 months. And yet one comment from Richard could make me question it all. That's when I knew I couldn't just let this slide. Margot hadn't just tried to sabotage my career, she'd tried to manipulate Emily's view of me. Just like she had with Thomas, whoever he was. Just like she likely had with anyone who dared to love her daughter on terms she didn't approve of. This wasn't about me being a photographer, this was about control. So when Emily came home the next night and said casually, "Oh, by the way, Mom wants new headshots for her charity board," she asked if you'd take them, I didn't hesitate. "Sure," I said. "Tell her I'll come by this weekend." I smiled. Not the polite social smile. The kind of smile you wear when the trap is set and the lens is already focused. Margot greeted me at the door with the same rehearsed warmth she always used for show. "Liam, thank you for coming. Gerald's at the office this morning. Just us." Her outfit was immaculate cream silk blouse, subtle pearls makeup applied with the precision of a woman trained in appearances. I carried my camera bag in one hand and in the other a sealed envelope. It was light, but the weight of it was undeniable. She led me through the main hall and into the formal sitting room which she had staged for the session, soft lighting, fresh flowers, an antique mirror angled to catch the sun. "Let's make this quick," she said, smoothing her hair. "I have a lunch to get to downtown." I didn't take out my camera. Instead, I set the envelope on the glass coffee table in front of her. "Before we start," I said evenly, "I think you'll want to see this." Margot blinked, that polished smile faltering just for a moment. She picked up the envelope, slid her manicured nail under the seal, and pulled out the contents, a toxicology report, and copies of her prescription records, 3 different physicians, overlapping refills, and an alarming pattern of dosage escalation. Her hands trembled. What is this?" she asked. "Some kind of joke?" I stayed silent, watching her scan the report, her eyes darting across the words benzodiazepines, detected her expression shifting from confusion to denial. "This is absurd," she said sharply. "I would never drug anyone." I tilted my head slightly. "We both know what happened, Margot." Her eyes flashed, and for a moment, the curtain dropped. "You're not good enough for my daughter," she snapped. "You never were. A man should offer stability, not pictures." There it was, the truth in its rawest form. No more subtle digs, no more veiled insults. I didn't react. I let her keep speaking. Emily needs someone with a future, with a career that means something, not a starving artist with a camera in a rented apartment. And drugging her husband, I said calmly, is your way of offering her stability. She stiffened. It wasn't dangerous. Just enough to make you miss your precious gallery opening. She would have seen you as unreliable. I was trying to protect her from making a mistake. My jaw tightened. So the goal was to sabotage me, make her doubt me, and then push her back towards someone like Thomas. Her silence answered that. I stood up. "Here's what's going to happen next. You're going to tell Richard exactly what you did. You're going to stop interfering in our marriage. And if you so much as whisper another lie about me, I will show Emily everything." Margot laughed. Not a joyful sound, but brittle and hollow. "She'll never believe you over us. You're the outsider. We are her family." I slung my camera bag over my shoulder. "Maybe. But she'll believe the report. And the prescriptions. And the neighbors who've whispered about your behavior at those country club luncheons. Are you really willing to risk losing your daughter over this?" That wiped the smile off her face. Her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. I turned and walked out without taking a single photo. That night, the storm came. Emily got a call from her mother while we were eating dinner. I could hear the tremble in Margot's voice even from across the table. He was aggressive, Emily. Unstable. He brought papers, said terrible things. I didn't even feel safe. Emily stared at me, wide-eyed, phone still against her ear. "Did you threaten my mother?" she asked. "No," I said quietly, but I told her the truth. She ended the call and looked at me like she didn't recognize me. What truth? I walked to my studio, returned with the manila folder I had kept sealed until now. I handed it to her without speaking. She opened it slowly, reading the toxicology report, the overlapping prescriptions, and the summary of Jason's findings. "This can't be real," she whispered. "My mom wouldn't." But even as she said it, I saw the shift in her eyes. Doubt, yes, but something deeper. Recognition. The pieces had never fully made sense to her, but now they had shape. I didn't push. "I didn't want to force this on you," I said, "but you needed to know." She spent the rest of the night pacing the living room, occasionally picking up the papers and reading them again. When I went to bed, she stayed on the couch. I heard her crying softly through the door. Over the next week, Emily said very little. She left early for work, came home late. We didn't argue, we barely spoke. And when she did speak, it was cautious quiet, as if she was afraid of what else might be true. Meanwhile, I worked. I edited photos, responded to emails, kept myself busy. The silence between us was heavy. But I respected it. She needed space to confront a lifetime of parental illusions. And then, just when I began to wonder if silence would become permanent, a package arrived. No return address. Just my name written in unfamiliar but deliberate handwriting. Inside, I found a USB drive and a note, "You should see this." It was signed with a single initial A, Ava. The USB drive was matte black, unbranded, ordinary looking, except I knew it wasn't. The note was written in cursive, each letter deliberate and clean. "You should see this." Signed simply A. There was only one person it could be. Ava, Noah's wife. The quiet one who always seemed to be observing more than she spoke. Over the years, she'd never joined in the family sniping, never rolled her eyes when Margot belittled me or when Richard launched into one of his monologues about real careers. She just watched like she was waiting for something. And now, apparently, that something had come. I took the USB into my studio and plugged it into my editing rig. A folder popped up, Ellison house footage. Inside were dozens of video files, time-stamped, labeled by room and date. Security footage. I clicked on the first, kitchen 22-23-970-134.mp4. The night of Margot's birthday dinner. There she was, alone in the kitchen. She moved quickly, confidently, as if this routine was familiar. She took out 2 wine glasses, poured sangria into each, and then from her pocket withdrew the small vial. I watched as she tipped it into the left glass, stirred once, and tucked the vial away again. A few seconds later, the hallway camera caught me entering the kitchen. I took the glasses. No words, just movements. Then the dining room feed, me placing the tampered glass in front of Richard, sitting down, pretending nothing was wrong. I swallowed hard. Even though I'd lived it, seeing it from this angle objectively without emotion was jarring. The proof was undeniable. This wasn't suspicion. This wasn't interpretation. This was fact. But it wasn't over. The next video was living room 2023-970-245.mp4, post-dinner. Margot was pacing. Richard was sitting in his armchair, pale and weak from vomiting. They were arguing. "You gave him the wrong glass," she hissed. "You weren't supposed to drink that one?" Richard barked back. "You shouldn't have done it at all." Margot, "What if Liam had called the police?" Margot waved him off. "It wasn't dangerous, just enough to knock him out. Keep him from going to that gallery thing. Emily needs to see he's not reliable." Richard glared. "This isn't the first time, is it?" Margot didn't answer. I sat back stunned. The next clip was even more disturbing. Living room 2023-919-2011.mp4. 2 days later. Margot and Richard again, but this time the topic was Emily. "He knows," Richard said. "And if he tells her, she won't believe him?" Margot snapped. "And even if she does, I've already started. I've been planting ideas, dropping hints. She thinks their marriage is strained because of him. Give me another week or 2 and she'll believe it was her idea to leave." I paused the video, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't just about me. This wasn't an isolated act of sabotage. This was a long-term, calculated effort to dismantle Emily's life one piece at a time, to shape her choices, her partners, her future, all while hiding behind the mask of concerned parenting. I understood now why Margot had always appeared calm. She believed she was untouchable. I picked up my phone and called Ava. She answered on the second ring. "You saw it?" she asked, without greeting. "All of it," I replied. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" There was a pause on the line. "Because they did the same to me," she said finally. "When I married Noah, they tried to turn him against me. Margot called me manipulative, said I was using him, said my family background wasn't stable enough." Her voice shook slightly. "It nearly worked. We almost didn't make it." "But you stayed," I said. "I stayed," she replied, "because I knew the problem wasn't us, it was them. But Owen, he still doesn't see it. He's blinded by who they used to be. I gave you the footage because I can't stand by while they do it again." "Does Noah know?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "Not yet." I thanked her and hung up the weight of everything I just watched and heard, pressing down on my chest like a lead blanket. I looked across the room to where Emily was sitting on the couch reading. She looked up and smiled faintly, tired, cautious. She still hadn't decided what to believe, and I couldn't blame her. The next morning, a message lit up on my phone. It was from Richard. "We should talk. Man to man. No wives." I showed the message to Ava, then to Emily, who just looked at it for a long moment before saying, "Do it. I want to know what he says when I'm not in the room." That afternoon, I drove to his country club in Saanich. He was waiting in a private lounge, sitting with a glass of bourbon and an expression I couldn't read. "Julian," he said, still using my name like it was a corporate transaction. "Families are complicated." I sat across from him and didn't respond. "Margot is difficult. She gets carried away, but she means well. Drugging someone is not meaning well," I said quietly. He waved dismissively. "It was a misunderstanding. She takes medication. Probably mixed something up." I leaned forward. "I have the footage, Richard." His face went still, then cold. "What do you want?" he asked. "Money." "An apology." "A public confession." "I want you to leave us alone," I said. "Stop meddling. Stop manipulating. Let Emily live her life without your shadow over her choices." He smirked. "We've dealt with people like you before, Liam. Ask her about Thomas, the fiancé before you." I froze. She came running back to us crying, just like she will again. He was wrong, but now I knew exactly what I was up against. I didn't go home right away. After leaving Richard's country club, I parked near the waterfront and stared out at the choppy gray waters of the Salish Sea. The air was damp and cold, but I didn't feel it. My hands were still clenched on the steering wheel, knuckles white jaw tight. "Ask her about Thomas," Richard had said. She came running back to us crying. The words had been delivered like a punchline, casual, cruel, confident, as though this were a game he'd won before and planned to win again. That night, I waited until Emily had gone to bed before I dug through my contacts and found Bethany Cooper. We'd only met twice, both times briefly during family gatherings. She was Emily's best friend from university, now living in Vancouver and working in urban forestry. I sent a message. "Hi, Bethany. I know this is sudden. I need to ask you something about Emily's past. It's important. Private." She responded in less than 10 minutes. "What's going on? Is this about Thomas?" I called her. "Yes," I said as soon as she picked up. "I just found out he existed." Richard mentioned him like a warning shot. "I need to understand what happened." Bethany's voice softened. "That was awful. He was great for her, Liam. A good guy, orthopedic resident, funny, supportive. I thought they'd get married. Then everything fell apart fast. Her parents said he cheated. They even showed her a photo of him with another woman." Emily was heartbroken. Thomas tried to explain it was a cousin visiting from Montreal, but by then she'd blocked his number, moved back to Victoria, and the wedding was off. I closed my eyes. They staged it. Bethany didn't hesitate. I wouldn't put it past them. I thanked her and hung up, anger curling cold and sharp in my gut. I knew what I had to do next. Reaching out to Thomas wasn't easy. He was now working in Edmonton according to his online profile. I sent an email with the subject line, "I'm married to Emily. I think what happened between you wasn't your fault." I expected silence, but he replied the next day, Call me." We spoke for nearly an hour. Thomas had tried to move on, but I could hear the echo of old pain in his voice. "I loved her," he said. "We were building something real. Then one night she was cold, distant. She told me she didn't trust me anymore. Her mom had shown her photos, said they had proof. When I tried to explain, she shut down." He paused. "I always wondered if they orchestrated it, but I didn't want to make her choose between me and them." I asked him if he still had the emails. He did. He forwarded them, polite but panicked messages he'd sent to Emily, begging her to listen, to believe him, to question the story she'd been handed. Reading them, I felt sick. It wasn't just about me anymore. This was a pattern, a system, a method Margot and Richard had mastered over decades: eliminate anyone who challenged their control, poison trust, and weaponize loyalty. I spent the next 3 days in full investigative mode. I contacted a few of Emily's old friends, those who had drifted out of her life after we got married. Every single one had a story. One had been accused of encouraging recklessness. Another was told by Margot she was jealous of Emily's stable relationship. Another said Richard once emailed her boss after she and Emily launched a short-lived non-profit project together, suggesting she had misused funds. No one had ever spoken of it before because no one had been asked. But now they talked, and I listened. I compiled everything: screenshot statements, copies of the emails from Thomas, voice memos from friends who didn't want to write things down but were willing to speak. I backed it all up in the cloud on an encrypted drive and on 3 separate USB sticks. And then I called Noah. "Dinner at our place," I said. "You and Ava. This weekend. It's important." He hesitated. "Is this about the footage?" "Yes," I said. "But it's more than that now." On Saturday evening, I cooked Emily's favorite garlic lemon salmon with roasted carrots and tried to act normal. Emily was quieter than usual but helped set the table. She didn't ask questions. Maybe she sensed it, that something was coming. When Noah and Ava arrived, we made small talk over wine and salad. It felt surreal, 4 people sitting around a table pretending to be a family while the truth waited quietly in the other room. After dessert, I cleared my throat. "There's something you both need to see." I walked over to the TV, connected my laptop, and clicked the folder labeled Ellison Truth. Emily looked up from her plate. "What is this?" I didn't answer. I let the first video play. The screen lit up with the grainy footage of Margot in the kitchen pouring sangria into 2 glasses. Her movements were methodical. She reached into her pocket, withdrew the vial, and tipped it into the left glass. In the silence of our living room, you could almost hear the weight of the moment drop. Emily's fork paused mid-air. Ava didn't blink. Noah shifted in his chair. The next clip played automatically, Richard sitting in the living room, flushed and sick, Margot pacing furiously. "You gave him the wrong glass," she snapped. "You weren't supposed to drink that one." Richard's voice, strained and angry, echoed through the speakers. "You shouldn't have done it at all." Emily looked down at her hands, her breathing shallow. I reached for the remote, about to stop. She shook her head. "Keep going," she said quietly. The third clip played. "Give me another week or 2, Margot said on the screen, voice low, "and she'll believe it was her idea to leave him." Noah sat back in his chair like he'd been struck. That's not my mother," he said, barely above a whisper. Emily's eyes were wide but dry. Her fingers were clenched into fists on her lap. "There's more," I said gently, "if you're ready." She nodded once. I played a series of voice memos and screenshots, emails from Thomas, messages from old friends. One after another, pieces of a puzzle that had never quite fit before fell into place. A decade's worth of patterns. Isolation, manipulation, careful character assassinations disguised as concern. And it always ended the same way, with Emily retreating back to her parents, believing everyone else was wrong. When it ended, no one spoke for a long moment. Then Emily stood. She walked into the kitchen without a word. I thought she might cry, or scream, or leave. Instead, she returned with a glass of water, sipped it, and said, "So it wasn't just Thomas." Her voice was flat, controlled, dangerous. "I always thought it was strange," she continued, "how my friends disappeared, how things would go wrong with people I cared about. I thought it was me, that I was pushing them away, but it was never me. Was it? Noah was silent. Ava reached for his hand. He pulled it away. You knew, he asked, her voice cracking. I suspected, she whispered. I tried to tell you once. You told me I was being paranoid. He stared at her. And you didn't show me this sooner. I didn't have proof, she said. Until now. Emily turned to me. Why didn't you tell me about all this earlier? Because if I had, you might have believed them, I said honestly. I needed you to see it with your own eyes. She nodded slowly. Then she reached for her phone. Margot answered on speaker. Emily, sweetheart, is everything all right? We're coming over, Emily said flatly. All of us, tonight. There was a pause. Darling, that's not really. No more excuses, Emily interrupted. We're not children. We deserve answers. Another pause. Fine, Margot said coldly. We'll be here. As she hung up, Emily turned to me. They'll deny everything. They'll twist it. Try to make you the villain. I gave a small smile. Let them try. The camera doesn't blink. An hour later, we pulled into the circular driveway of the Ellison house. The lights were on. Curtains drawn. The atmosphere inside was eerily composed. Richard and Margot sat on opposite ends of the long, formal sofa, both holding wine glasses as if it were just another Thursday night. Noah and Ava entered first. Then Emily and I stepped inside, and I placed my tripod by the fireplace without saying a word. What's that? Margot asked, her voice thin. Documentation, I replied. You like records, Margot. Let's make sure we all remember this the same way. This is private family business, Richard said sternly. Exactly, I said. And I'm family, even though you've tried very hard to pretend otherwise. For 2 hours we laid it out. Everything. The drink. The plan to sabotage me. The manipulated breakup with Thomas. The pattern of controlling every meaningful connection in their children's lives. Margot denied, deflected, gaslit. Richard tried to stay calm, insisting I had twisted things out of context. But each denial was answered by a video, an email, a recording. Each excuse unraveled faster than the last. Emily sat still the entire time, hands folded in her lap, eyes locked on her mother's face. Finally, when the last clip ended, she stood. I love you, she said, voice steady. But what you've done is unforgivable. You don't get to run my life anymore. You don't get to decide who I love or what success looks like. Noah beside her rose as well. We're not your pawns, and I'm done pretending we are. Margot's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were the tears of a queen watching her empire fall. Richard just looked stunned, like he still couldn't understand how he'd lost control. As we turned to leave, I placed a small USB drive on the table. This has everything. It's yours. I won't share it, unless you make me. Richard stared at it like it was a ticking bomb. I met his eyes. You taught me something, I said. Control only works until people open their eyes. Well, now we've seen. They didn't speak as we left. No pleas, no apologies, no desperate attempts to reclaim narrative. Just silence, icy, polished, and distant, the exact kind they had perfected over years. But something had shifted. For the first time since I'd met the Ellisons, the power in the room had not belonged to them. It had belonged to the truth. And the truth, once recorded and played aloud, couldn't be controlled. Not even by Margot. 3 days later, Richard emailed me. Subject line, A proposition. He invited me to his private study. No wives, no cameras this time. I didn't respond right away. I waited, watched. Then I said yes, but I brought my phone with a voice recorder app running in my coat pocket. The study was just as I remembered: walnut bookshelves, a mahogany desk, a half-finished jigsaw puzzle on a side table. Richard poured 2 glasses of single malt, offering one to me. I declined. He took a long sip before speaking. You're not stupid, he said. I underestimated that. I said nothing. You protected Emily. I'll give you that. You held your ground. That's rare. Still, I didn't answer. I wasn't here for validation. But let's not pretend you didn't enjoy it, he said, leaning back. The power shift, the performance, All of it staged perfectly like a scene from one of your photo exhibitions. You think this was for show, I asked. I think you're a storyteller, Liam, he said. And you told one hell of a story. I held his gaze. No, I revealed yours. He smirked. Fine, but let's be honest. You want something now. Money. A place in the family business, influence. Everyone wants something. That's when I realized he still didn't understand. Even with everything laid bare, even after watching his children walk out of his control, Richard still thought this was a negotiation. I want you to stop, I said simply. No more phone calls to Emily's friends, no more whisper campaigns, no more subtle jabs at dinner, no more plans. He raised an eyebrow. And if I don't, I still have everything, I replied, including new footage. Ava's camera caught more than you think. He tensed. You're bluffing. Try me. There was a long silence. Then he nodded slowly. You know Haley always had a sharp tongue. But Emily, she was different. Softer, easier to guide. And there it was, the admission. Not loud, not formal, but real. He hadn't raised his children. He had curated them, and now they were stepping out of the frame. Later that week, Emily and I sat on the back deck of our apartment, a warm September breeze rustling the grapevines that grew along our railing. She cradled a mug of mint tea in one hand, the other resting absent-mindedly on her abdomen. She was 3 months pregnant, and the news had come to us like sunlight through fog, quiet, undeniable, and filled with promise. I haven't spoken to them since that night, she said softly. You don't have to, I replied. Not until you're ready. She nodded. But I want them to know. About the baby. They'll use it, I warned. As a way back in. I know, she said, but this time we draw the lines. We agreed to visit, but on our terms. We'd stay for an hour. No overnight stays. No unsupervised visits. No advice unless asked. It was the first time Emily had spoken about her parents with boundaries and meant them. When we arrived, Margot had prepared a feast. Richard stood at the doorway, trying too hard to act casual. You look well, he said to Emily then, after a beat to me. So do you. Dinner passed with forced civility. They asked questions, avoided difficult topics. Margot's eyes welled with tears when Emily told them about the pregnancy, but she didn't try to touch her. That was something. After the meal, Richard asked to speak with me alone. We sat in the same study. He poured another scotch this time, not offering one. I've been thinking, he said, about your work. You have talent, real talent, but talent without scale is a missed opportunity. I could help you, bring you into my firm, help you open doors. I stared at him. Why your family? He said. And you earned it. No, I said. You're offering this to own it, to own me, and that's never going to happen. His smile froze. Liam, be reasonable. This is an olive branch. It's a leash, I replied, and I don't wear leashes. I stood, walked to the door, and paused. Emily doesn't need your money, and our child won't grow up thinking success comes from control. As I turned, I saw it, the smallest flicker of something in his face. Not anger, not fear. Something closer to respect. That night, as Emily and I lay in bed, she rested her head on my shoulder and whispered, They'll never change, will they? No, I said. But we did. That's enough. And for the first time in months, I slept without waking up in the middle of the night wondering what they'd do next. Because I finally knew. It didn't matter. The camera had captured the truth, and the truth had changed everything. 6 months passed like slow-moving light across an old photograph, quiet, measured, but undeniably forward. Emily's pregnancy progressed with few complications. Our apartment in Fernwood became a small haven filled with warmth, gentle routines, and the sound of new beginnings. I spent most of those months preparing something I'd always dreamed of but never prioritized: my own photography gallery. A permanent space. Mine. I called it Fraser Light. Nestled near Victoria's Inner Harbor in a former boatworks building now converted into artist studios. The gallery was white-walled and raw, with exposed beams and polished concrete floors. I filled it with what mattered: wide-format prints from my wildlife series in Alberta, portraits from local Indigenous elders I'd documented with permission and care, architectural abstracts from Halifax, Montreal to Fino. My life in frames. On opening night, Emily stood by my side in a flowing navy dress, her rounded belly visible beneath the fabric. Her cheeks glowed, one hand gently resting against the future we had built together. Ava and Noah arrived first, carrying a bottle of sparkling pear cider. Noah hadn't spoken much since that night at his parents' house, but he had softened. Now he clapped me on the shoulder and said quietly, "You were right." That was enough. My parents had flown in from the Okanagan, wide-eyed and proud, wandering through the gallery and taking photos on their phones like tourists. Dozens of guests arrived: friends, clients, editors, even strangers who'd followed my work for years. I had just started thanking a couple from CBC Arts when I saw them. Richard and Margot stood near the door, hesitant. Margot wore muted gray, her expression unreadable. Richard looked older somehow, like the last 6 months had peeled back a veneer he hadn't realized he was wearing. They approached slowly. "Congratulations," Margot said, first eyes flicking across the frames. "It's impressive." "Thank you," I replied. Not cold, but not warm either. Richard cleared his throat. "You've built something real here." I nodded. That was the idea. They didn't stay long. Margot held Emily's hand for a moment, asked about the baby, then drifted away. Richard lingered behind. "You didn't have to invite us," he said. "I didn't," I replied. "You showed up anyway. But this space, it's open to the public. Even the people who tried to control the artist." He gave a short, dry chuckle. "Fair enough. They left without causing a scene. And that, I realized, was its own kind of victory. They didn't get to shape this night. They didn't get to interrupt or influence or reframe it. They were simply their background figures, no longer directors of the story." 2 weeks later, a certified envelope arrived. No note, no card. Just legal documents, the deed to the house Emily and I had been renting transferred to our names clean. Along with it, paperwork establishing a trust fund for our unborn daughter. I read every line twice. No conditions, no expectations, no signatures required. Emily sat across from me sorting laundry when I told her. She stared at the documents for a long moment before saying, "It's not an apology." "No," I agreed, "but it's an acknowledgement." That spring, our daughter was born. We named her Eliza, after my grandmother, the first person who ever handed me a camera and told me the world was full of moments worth capturing. Margot and Richard visited the hospital. They brought flowers, gifts, a silver frame. They held Eliza gently, almost reverently, but didn't stay long. No parenting advice, no warnings, just quiet wonder and a new cautious distance. In the months that followed, the boundaries we'd set held strong. Emily chose what we shared. I chose what we didn't. We accepted visits on our terms, said no when we felt like it, and smiled only when we meant it. One evening, as I was editing a new batch of photos in my home studio, Eliza asleep upstairs, Emily reading by the window, a thick envelope arrived. It was from Richard's investment firm. Inside was a printed copy of their annual report. On the cover, one of my shots, a black and white architectural portrait I'd taken years ago of the firm's restored heritage headquarters. Page after page of my work filled the publication staff headshots, interiors, sweeping skyline panoramas. Every image uncredited but unmistakably mine. Tucked into the back cover was a handwritten note: "Hired the best photographer I know. Thought you'd want a copy. R." I held the envelope in my hands, unsure whether to laugh or shake my head. It wasn't reconciliation, it wasn't respect exactly, but it was something that for Richard meant more acknowledgement through action. I didn't call to thank him. I didn't need to. Some things don't require words. They require silence, boundaries, and proof that you've won not by fighting louder, but by living better. That summer, on a quiet evening with stars blinking over the Pacific, I sat on our porch with Eliza in my arms and Emily beside me. She turned to me and said, "You know what? The best part is, what that we never had to become like them to survive them. I kissed her forehead, held our daughter a little tighter, and smiled into the dusk. Because in the end, we hadn't beaten the Ellisons by breaking them. We'd won by refusing to let them break us. Some relationships wear the mask of love, but are rooted in control, expectation, and quiet manipulation. Through Liam Fraser's journey, we learned that silence isn't weakness. It's often the most powerful form of resilience. Instead of reacting with anger, Liam chose to observe, gather truth, and let evidence speak louder than confrontation. His calm strength and emotional clarity show us that dignity is not about shouting back, but about standing firm in who you are. For older viewers who may have experienced family tensions or years of being misunderstood, this story is a gentle reminder. Happiness does not come from earning others' approval, but from living with integrity, protecting what you love, and setting healthy boundaries. Even if others never change, we still have the power to change how we respond, and that alone can break a cycle that spans generations. If this story spoke to something in your heart, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like more thoughtful human stories like this, consider subscribing so you won't miss the next one.